So I first thought, I said this before, was that kind of choosing not to exist sucks, but there's always an out. So I immediately kind of went away from that and was like, that's not a good argument. But one thing that I did stumble upon, which I just haven't been able to get rid of, was that you create something like a life that's finite, essentially. And the analogy I kind of would use is something like you're basically tied to train tracks, but you get to exist temporarily, but somebody is just throwing you in the way, I guess. You're just
Uh, I mean, so the idea is like, okay, we're giving you life, but you're also not going to have unlimited life. Therefore, this is somehow wrong.
yeah, well, I think it's bad that you die, and I think somebody causing you to be in the position that you'll die is kind of
Uh,
causing you to be in that dilemma, I guess.
well, I think more life, more gooder. So long as the life is an enjoyable life, right? So like a suffering existence
Yeah.
is not a good one. If somebody, if you help somebody get the access to like euthanasia and their life is full of suffering, and it will be for forever, I think that's fine. So I would say that life is a good thing generally. As long as it's filled with good experiences. And
Hmm.
so it does suck that we can't give people unlimited life, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't give people life at all, and we should just have just nobody be alive.
So
That seems kind of lame.
you would say that people being alive and being happy is better than nothing.
Was I think what matters is really happiness, and so being alive is a prerequisite to be able to experience happiness.
Okay. Um,
And I don't mean happiness in just the emotion. Oh, I'm smiling. I mean like
right.
real satisfaction, enjoyable experiences.
How do you measure whether somebody has had like a net positive life? Is it just self-reporting?
Well, so one of the unfortunate facts about subjective mental states is they're subjective in the sense that they are only known by the subject.
Yeah.
Although we can look at corollaries experience, like physical corollaries. So, under a physicalist view, we could say that really happiness is legitimately just a bunch of neurochemicals. And so we may have a pretty decent understanding of the physical things that generate happiness. And so if that account is true, which I'm sympathetic to, then we wouldn't even have to ask them. If we just had enough data on people's bodies at any point, over the course of life, we could know whether they were happy or not and having good lives or not.
Hmm. Do you not put any, I guess, inherent value in autonomy or like consent specifically?
I think those are all instrumental value. I can't think of a intrinsic value to it.
Okay. Because my general thing is that I don't like the idea of like people telling other people what to do in general. Like I try to, as long as you're not harming anyone else, is the caveat because you'd be taking away someone else's autonomy. But I feel
Well, so I
like,
mean, I agree with you. Just so
yeah,
you know.
is it only a proxy for like being in a happy mental state, though?
Yeah, no, I think it's a fully instrumental. It's an extremely valuable principle.
Yeah.
But sometimes it can be used just like any other principle to justify something that we clearly know is bad. And in this case, that would be the idea that nobody should have any kids, therefore all life should go extinct. That seems pretty bad. And I think part of the
Mm.
problem with the principle is it relies on an action inaction distinction, which I don't think there really is any distinction. So it's like, okay, well, you're not bringing someone into the world, so you're not doing something. And so you basically not caused them harm. But if bringing them into the world would have given them a really great life, let's say their life was going to be perfect, and they would
Hmm.
stub their toe one time, just a singular time. Under
Yeah.
your view, well, that's going to be a bad thing to do. under my view, I'm saying, well, not having that kid, something bad has happened if you don't have that kid. The world has been made worse for it. And you can visualize this with buttons. Actually, it's easier than like childbearing is more complicated. But if you have a button where you can spawn extremely happy people, like 99% happy people, would it be good or bad to press the button? I would say emphatically, it's great to press the button. They're going to be super happy, and you would have to say no because if they have any suffering in their life, or since they're going to die, it's
Yeah,
necessarily bad.
like if my utopia existed, like nobody was harmed in the real world, like if there's zero harm, but people had like finite lives, I feel like I can't get past that. It um
I mean,
like that's
I just don't understand why we must have either infinite life or no life. I don't see why more life is not more good.
because the individual doesn't get to choose the fact that they die. Like you are just screwing them ultimately, and in like the most grand sense.
Well, because they're not going to get an unlimited amount of this good thing. So
I
it's
think
like
it's
I gave you money and you're not gonna have it eventually because you're gonna use it. I can only it's only good for me to give you money if I give you infinite money.
I think it's only about the choice. I don't care about how happy they are necessarily, right? Like I would say the choice to, because
I
if
mean,
you
what
have
is
infinite,
choice?
what is choice?
I don't even know. I don't even know really what that means. Like as a like epistemologically important property. I don't know why that would matter. I mean, I don't believe in non-determined action. I agree with
I
most
don't
philosophers in the sense that I think action is determined.
I think I ultimately do too, but I think in order to make any ethical statements ever, you have to act as if people are agents. Like it would be kind of weird for me to just pretend I'm God and go about it in that way. Maybe that doesn't make sense, but
Well, I don't think that's necessary. I don't think that we should start making normative claims on the basis of what we know to be illusion.
hmm
Um, so, like, we're agents. We're just not free agents. We make choice based on a will. It's just not free.
sure.
Um, and so I would just say, like, this any obsession with, consent or, what people would choose in this instance. I mean, like, I think people can make choices for themselves that are bad. And it would be better if that choice didn't happen. Now, practically, I don't think that the government or me and you should always be making those decisions for them. But I think in the instance of, whether a child's going to be born, the fact that there's like for like 30% of them, they would have chosen to not be born in the first place is irrelevant to whether it would be good or bad for them to be born.
I don't think so. I feel like that mindset is almost authoritarian in a way. Like you're taking away the decision whether it could have actualized or not, I guess. There's just some sort of
So I'm determining the decision based on evidence about what's good for people instead of particles in their physical brain determining the decision for them. Remember, I'm not saying, I'm not making a practical claim. I'm
yeah.
making a normative claim about what's really good and what's really bad. Right? So suppose you had a person who was going to live literally a perfect existence, but for some reason they were under the impression that was not going to be the case, or
hmm
maybe their neurons misfired, and so they made a decision that they knew was bad. Like, I mean, who cares? It'd be good for them to live that life, right?
That felt like a statement about whether we should stop people from committing suicide or not. I assume you would say we should.
Um, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, if it's a bad decision, there's maybe
I
some instances where it's not.
Yeah, I almost axiomatically just can't get past like violating their autonomy to make the decision whether in a hypothetical world or even empirically we could say they would have lived a happier life in the future.
I mean,
And
so
like,
are you deriving that axiom based on like an intuition? Because like,
yes,
I don't think that's a. First of all, I don't believe that you genuinely think that like it would be better for no one to exist.
I
Like, I don't
I
think that's an intuitive claim for you.
I can be convinced otherwise, but it
And even
it
if it is,
absolutely is.
you'd
Yeah.
acknowledge that if you have an intuition that's completely 100% different than everybody else's, it's
hmm
probably not the strongest substantiation for the claim.
Um, I don't know what you mean by that. Why would I have to compare my individual ethical system to other people?
Hello?
Oh, sweet.
Hey, what's up?
Okay. So, what was the last thing you heard me say? I was lagging out. Okay.
Oh man, I don't even know. Yeah, you lagged out for
Um,
like a straight 4 minutes.
oh my God. So I was saying, you have this axiom you've derived, right? And I said, I assume you did it via intuition.
Yeah,
Okay. Um, so would you recognize that this is an intuition that's not very widely shared?
yes.
Do you consider intuitions that you have that are in like extremely deep contradiction with that of with pretty much everybody else to be reliable truth makers?
I don't I don't think normative statements can be true unless you're talking about like if you want X then Y, but if you're talking about why you would
Oh, you're
want
an
X in the first place,
anti-realist.
maybe.
Wait,
Is there a good
wait,
argument
okay.
for realism that I haven't heard?
Wait a minute. Wait a minute. So you're talking about axioms and you're a realist. I mean, you're anti-realist. I mean, that's going to be okay. That's going to be way less meaningful if you're non-realist.
I just mean I have some base moral into it. Seems like when I go through every single like ethical issue possible, my ultimate thing that I appeal to ends up being consent slash autonomy, or like the ability to make decisions, I guess, kind of anything
Yeah,
like
but like
that.
in but this case, if you look at the actual thing you're talking about, which is the vanquishing of all living things, the extinction of all life,
Sure.
that itself is not intuitive that that's preferable to you. You have to refer to the axiom in order to make a determination on it, which seems to be saying that the axiom itself almost has some sort of objective weight for you, but it
Mhm.
doesn't. So I don't see why you'd be so fixated on aligning your views with the axiom instead of aligning your axioms with your views.
I don't think I'm doing that. I think it's very intuitive for me that I think the statement like that you're born to die, I that's like horrifying. And I think it would be horrifying to continue the cycle.
I don't really agree with the characterization. I
Um,
mean, so you're born and you live. The
mhm.
natural state is being dead, so you just are dead for less time. Right? So you're born to be alive. That's really what it is, because that you're already dead prior to that state.
I think people would prefer to be alive if they are alive, and it's horrible that it's taken away from them.
It's horrible that people don't get unlimited life. Unlimited is a
Yes.
good thing. Well, yeah, we want more life. We wish we had more.
I think
The
it has to
worst
be on an
possible thing you
individual.
could do is
Go ahead.
have no life.
I don't think so. I think it has to do very specifically and with the ability to make the decision that, well, like whether you want to exist or not. And it's taken away if you're born into a finite, like mortal, essentially, because
Um,
you don't have that decision to stay alive for longer than like whatever 90 years.
Uh,
I don't know. I mean,
I mean, it's so the principle is going to be that it's wrong to put anybody in the instance where they do not have a choice about avoiding something bad at a certain point.
I I will hesitantly agree with that because that's
Okay, that's a crazy bullet bite. You realize the reductios on that are going to be insane. Like that position is going to just run directly against everything. You can't get people food because they could have food poisoning. You can't have roads or trains or any form of transportation because somebody could die. You can't even have electrical works because by installing them, there is a point something percent chance that somebody gets hurt.
well, I mean, there's 100% chance that you die if you're born. I guess I would say if there's a 100% somebody is harmed by something, like I think it's
And so
bad
you'd
in
say,
itself that they don't have that decision.
okay, so if there's 100% chance that somebody receives some harm, then you should not do it, this thing to them, even if they receive more positive stuff from it than the harm. That's the principle.
Mm.
Because now every surgery is bad under your view.
I think the problem is I'm not abstracting harm necessarily. It's specifically about the decision making. So
So
what
you're
I
going to
would
have this
say,
extremely specific accent.
well, for the surgery example, like if you agree to a surgery, then that's well. If we have do not resuscitate, something like that,
It's a surgery on
you
somebody who
have that
maybe didn't
decision.
consent.
Yeah, like
Dude, so let's suppose that you're not conscious for the surgery
mm-hmm,
for the surgery decision making process to occur.
mm-hmm.
Is it still bad if it's necessary to save your life?
I I wouldn't say it's necessarily good or bad based on whether they would be saved or not, but I would make an appeal to empirical data on how many people would essentially agree to it, which would be most, like more than
Oh,
50%.
okay. Whoa. Well, okay. That's beautiful. Wait a second. So I think most people would agree in the cases where I support, people being born, which are where they have good lives.
Mm-hmm.
I think most people, if they knew they were going to have a net positive life, suppose we could quantify that, and they had perfect knowledge of that,
Yeah.
they would choose to be born. So would you agree with me in those
Um,
instances?
I think for most people that would be the case.
Right. So I mean, as long as it's over 50% under your review, right? That's all that matters.
Sorry, I'm just thinking for a second. I've talked about this topic very little. Um, I think that makes sense. Like, what would you do in my case, or like to the not 50%?
Well, I mean, we can never know what people are going to choose.
Yeah.
And here's the great thing: you can always choose. Once you reach a certain age, in your life earlier, um, once you're actually capable, you have the information and the wherewithal to make that decision.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think the worst case scenario is we give people about 18 years of life that maybe didn't want to have. Now, under my view, I don't care if they think they don't want to be alive. All I care about is whether their life is actually good or not. Because I know at many instances I felt suicidal impulses, and I know many other people have as well, who actually have good lives. And we would be making a mistake to kill ourselves. But under your view,
Mm-hmm.
well, I think it's not such a big sacrifice to make that people are going to have to live for 18 years, maybe without wanting to at a certain point.
I I think there's something to be said about whether your decision making is, I guess, informed or lucid. Like that would probably be a factor. So for suicide specifically, a lot of people, you could make an empirical argument about whether they're in the headspace or whether they've thought about it for a long time. Something like that, I could agree to. Um,
Wait. Under this view, we're actually just not even going to disagree, right? So I'm going to
yeah,
say that whenever somebody chooses to like suicide, or would choose death over the rest of their life, which would be, you know, objectively better, like if you net positive, supposing we can actually, determine that. I would just say that they either lack information or they're being irrational. And so if they were perfectly rational and they had perfect knowledge, then they would every single time choose the net positive life. Why? Because it's net positive. You would have to be irrational to not choose. It's like almost baked into the definition.
you think 100% of people with perfect information would stay alive?
And perfect rationality.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Oh,
Of course.
I don't know if I agree with that. I have a question about the happiness metric. Um,
Yeah.
do you think it's okay if some person like gorges on food every day and ends up being 400 pounds, but it's what they want?
Well, I'm not a preference utilitarian. So it's not about what they think they want. It's about what
Yeah.
what actually brings about what they really want, which
Mm-hmm.
is to have good experiences. So I don't think that morbidly obese people are actually living the optimal existence for their well-being and the welfare of others.
I'm so uncomfortable saying that. I don't know.
Wait, you're so uncomfortable with disapproving of morbidly obese lifestyle?
I don't think it's my place to tell people how they should live their private lives.
I mean, well, now you're making applied ethical claims. Right? We're not making applied ethical claims. We're making normative claims.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not going to say that I'm going to go up to obese people and say, "Hey, stop eating Doritos."
Sure.
Right? But I'm just going to say that they're making a bad. I can say that they're making a decision that's bad for themselves. Under your view,
I don't
it's
think
not
so.
even like it doesn't make it's not coherent to say somebody's making a bad decision for themselves.
Yeah, I can't even I don't get the intuition to say somebody is choosing to make a bad decision between like completely like things that don't harm other people essentially. Like the
Well, okay,
decision to eat
so
an apple or a bag of Doritos essentially, I can't tell. I just don't even think of one of them as better than the other for somebody else.
okay, let's break this down. So you think that given a goal, there's better and worse ways to achieve that goal,
Yep.
right? Okay. You also believe that people have goals.
Yeah.
Okay. There's like things that people desire.
Sure.
Okay. Now there's two ways we can go with this. Either we can take an a-naturalist view where people's goals are just determined by them. In that instance, we'd still be able to say if something was good or bad for a person just by referencing their goal. So we'd say, well, don't be obese because your goal is this, right? So we could still make that claim under your view. Under my view, I'm going to say that people's goals are not up in the air. There are facts about what people's goals are. It's kind of just an aspect of the universe that people really, their chief desire, the most desirable thing is positive experiences. And almost everything that they desire in their life is actually instrumental to that. It's not just a claim of this is how I think it is. I think it's a physiologically substantiated, like it's like a mechanistic description of how motivation actually works. And so that's going to be my view.
What if okay. And you would make an empirical claim about whether somebody would get more positive experiences by eating healthy or eating terribly?
Yes,
And
precisely.
they would only disagree on the descriptive aspect.
Well, so people can be wrong about what they desire. They cannot be aware of it,
Yeah.
right? So I'm not saying that people are cognizantly pursuing happiness for themselves. I'm saying that like their decision making is based off of these implicit preferences, which are mechanistically determined by pleasure associations. Like that is the evolutionary explanation of motivation. That's the only account that makes any sense to me. There's really not many others.
Do you think there's selflessness?
There is selfless behavior. The question is how does it mechanistically operate? Right?
I don't know. Are you like what is the term? Descriptive egoist or psychological? I don't remember.
I'd consider myself a psychological hedonist, with a caveat that I think it's totally conceivable that we have non-motivational instincts. It's like kind of like with computers, you know?
Yeah.
Like a computer has a line of code that just tells it to do this thing. There's no motivation.
Mm-hmm.
So there's unthinking acts. And so it's possible you can classify some selfless acts there. The rest are going to be based on pleasure associations.
You phrased it as unthinking.
Yeah.
What can't somebody be like long-term and deliberate about living a worse life to make others better? I guess, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, so whenever I think about instinctual action, think about like your heart beating, right? So you're not consciously choosing that. Moving your hand off of a hot pan. Now, some people will take the view that like whenever a parent sacrifices themselves for their kid, that's a product of like just some sort of evolutionary selected for non-pleasure based motivational. It's not motivational. It's like unthinking process. Okay. So it seems somewhat plausible to me. But in people that live altruistic lives, I totally believe that they're doing things for others, and they're conscious that it's going to make their life worse. But I think they associate with that altruism good experiences subconsciously. I think that's just how that operates, right? So I don't take it the hard psychological hedonism. This is the soft variant. I don't agree with egoists on almost anything but this one specific point.
So just to make sure I get what you're saying, if somebody like chooses to do something altruistic, can they or can they not do it? Like whether or I guess I should say, does it matter whether they get pleasure from it or not? Are you saying there's an underlying they want to do it even if they don't actively know it? Like that's an underlying process. That's the unthinking part.
Yeah. So I'm a physicalist, so there has to be a physical explanation of these things.
Sure.
It seems that pleasure is the signal for that allows motivation to be an operable mechanism for evolution. And so it seems that whenever we look at studies of animals and humans alike and their decision making and how carrots and sticks can affect it, it seems that even these like choices are just determined by pleasure associations. And so we use tons of instruments in life. Like I like to be logical, right? So even if something I think brings me less happiness, but it is the more rational thing to do, I may still choose the rational thing to do. That doesn't mean that the thing that I'm ultimately it's driving me is not pleasure, right? And so that's my claim. The implicit non-thinking description of how motivation will work.
I guess at that point, what would non-pleasure look like? Like if
so.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, so this is where people are going to get caught up in analytic descriptions, right? So they're going to say like, so when I'm identifying, is I'm saying these two things are the same. They just are, right? It's like water and H2O, right? And so saying, well, what it would be like if they weren't the same? What if water wasn't H2O? It would feel kind of strange because they kind of are the same thing. It's just two different ways of looking at the same thing. You know what I'm saying?
I guess my main problem is I'm finding it hard to wrap my head around how I could determine whether to agree with you or not, because you're saying the pleasure underlies all actions even if they don't appear as pleasure. It's like, how would I even determine if this is true or not? Like what specifically is the descriptive, like I guess the evidence then convinced you?
Yeah, so the best way to prove this is, I mean, there's two ways you can do it, right? So you can take areas where people do not have instrumental thought processes, where people are making decisions based on raw pleasure, and they're not using these other things, and see if um, they're making decisions, they're choosing the thing that is most pleasurable. This is where a lot of the thought experiments go. They try to eliminate these instrumental confounders that mess people up. The other thing you can do, this is where you can get into experimental science, is just see in animals and humans alike. If you give people rewards, pleasurable rewards for certain behaviors, and sticks for certain behaviors, how much does that affect their behavior? How much does it drive them? What is the explanation for any deviation? And in my opinion, from the data that we have, this is the best explanation. Now, just like pretty much any philosophical account in these regards, you can disprove it. We're making comparisons based off of theoretical virtues like parsimony and plausibility.
Sure. Okay.
So if you have an alternative account, I'm totally open-minded to it.
Okay. So if I grant the point that I shouldn't be an antinatalist for the fact that you don't agree that you're mortal, because most people wouldn't agree with that, what would you say about, do you think we live in a net positive world right now, I guess would be the first question.
For most humans?
Yeah, just for all humans, would it add up to over 0, I guess? However you
That's
do
an
it.
extremely hard question.
Yeah.
I would say that the way I live my life and shape my worldview is based on the assumption that life is net positive, or at least will be net positive in the future, in the foreseeable future, right? Because there's maybe some miserable poverty in Africa or something that might be offsetting it.
Yeah.
But at some point in the near future, it will be.
That's kind of the thought process I'm going to now, is like, at least before the year 2000, every single year in history, I would say, has probably been a net negative, based on like all of the horrible things, including the life cycle, essentially.
That's highly plausible. Although we'd have to really get into neurology, because you never know how the brain actually responds to greater qualities of life in terms of actual enjoyability. Because there's the entire like adjustment effect of basically, we get used to new stimulus. We get used to not having certain things that we deal with. And so the actual registration in terms of better experiences is not nearly as pronounced as we may think.
Yeah. I'm skeptical that there would ever be a world where there would be more good than bad. I guess I would go to the descriptive claim next.
So you think do you think it's just not possible, or would you just say it's like you just don't think it would be?
I mean,
you just can't conceive of how it would be achievable.
It's always technically possible, but I don't think it's likely.
So would you say your life has been net negative or net positive?
Me specifically, probably more negative than the average person. I would say negative.
Oh, that's unfortunate. So you'd say it'd be better if you never lived?
Yeah, I think that's where the intuition comes from, is just the fact that I think it, I guess, is like, and then I thought about like, on the grand scheme of like humans, like, or just beings in general, is like, how horrible is this? It's like,
so do you think if you were able to correct for the fact that negative memories are more pronounced than positive ones, and we're able to look at all the experiences in your life and sum up your subjective ratings of them, you would have a negative number?
Well, would you be counting like before I was even me? Well, oh gosh, people say I sound schizo when I say this. I don't think I was really myself until I was like 16 or 17. Like I wasn't fully conscious. I don't know if you know what I mean.
Well, I mean, I believe in self reduction, so I might just be even crazier than you.
What do you mean by that? I don't think I've heard that before.
I don't buy into satiety. I don't think we're consistent persons over time. I think we're different
Oh,
individuals.
okay. I know what you mean. Like, at least that reminded me of Hume a little bit. Um,
Yeah, I mean, I'm just gonna say like there's this assumption that you have like this continuous subjectivity, and I just don't see why we should believe in that.
um,
Um,
that's definitely. And don't you feel like you're the same like consciousness? You just have new information, so it's technically different.
um, no, right?
Okay.
So okay, there's multiple philosophy of mind approaches to this question. And so if we're physicalists and we believe that all that exists is stuff that at least supervenes onto physical facts, corresponds to specific physical facts.
Right.
The physical facts about my brain, not just the structure of the atoms and the information it has, but the very particles that consist of it, is constantly changing. And so the idea that the exact same product of it, the consciousness, is going to, continue to be the exact same over time, despite its component parts changing all the time, it seems very strange. I don't see how you can derive an identity from this thingness.
I completely understand what you're saying, and this is a completely terrible argument, but doesn't that feel wrong?
Well, no, it's not terrible because I'm a phenomenal conservativist as well, right? So intuition matters. You know, obviously
Sure.
intuitions are important because we can't ground to everything. We can't ground anything without intuition.
Because
Um,
ev-
go ahead.
oh, I was just gonna say, because every time, like, it's built into how you want to speak your language and how you want to communicate with other people's. Like, you say, yesterday I did this, or 10 years ago we went here. Like, every single thought and like thing you say has to do with you thinking yourself as a constant subject.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think it's a helpful illusion.
Okay.
Um, I just think remember, I believe we had to achieve reflective equilibrium among our views, right? So we have different views, and some of them are, some views are more intuitive than others, but they contradict others.
Yeah.
And so I think it's more intuitive to me that things supervene onto physical facts. It's not just like this floating subjectivity on mind that for some reason popped into existence
I
without
agree.
evolutionary explanation. I think that's less plausible than a continuous subjectivity is less plausible than like physicalism. You got to bite some bullets sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, I see what you're saying. I think I will agree with that. I mean, I guess it feels like when you say illusion, it kind of downplays it, but I guess you could always say, like, sure, it is very useful. Like the brain is playing a trick on itself, kind of.
Um, well, I mean, yeah. I mean, think about if you had these beings that were convinced that they were not the same continuous subject over time. They would not be very good at surviving
Yeah,
because they wouldn't care.
man.
But although actually it wouldn't change any behavior, really. It would maybe change planning for the future. But by the time you even try to change your lifestyle in accordance with this new knowledge, you're already a different person.
Hmm.
So it's like, it's really strange. Some people say, like, well, why don't I just go overdose on meth? And it's like, well, by the time you get there, you're going to be like 15 persons different than you are now.
Sure.
So,
Do you not worry about like dementia or something?
why would I worry about that?
I feel like for most people and for myself, that's like I would consider it me dying. Like the moment I lose memories, I'm dead. But maybe you would just
Um,
say we're dying all the time based on, right?
yeah, so I realize that my regard for myself is just going to be incoherent under my view. But I take it to be a true statement that pleasure in general is just desirable, and so it's desirable not just for me in this millisecond in which I exist. It's also desirable for others, my future selves,
Hmm.
and so I care about that, just like I care about your well being. And I think if you suffer, that's bad. Something bad has happened, and so that's the way I think about it.
It's hard for me to engage with like philosophy of mind stuff. That's like probably the thing I know the least about. But that sounds plausible for sure.
Yeah, like metaphysics and ontology has been my vibe for the past month and a half.
Really interesting. I have a professor that was a phenomenologist. Um, I don't know if you would like that or not.
Like what specifically this research?
Um, well, I can only say the few authors she had us read that she liked. Um, like Husserl, uh, Merleau-Ponty, I think is his name. Just like I don't know. We spent a whole semester talking about like the experience of looking at objects, essentially.
Oh, is that going to be like aesthetic
It
value, or is
it
this
was
going to be
it
like
kind of
a
had to do
qualia
with
thing?
mind stuff. Yeah, I think it was more about how the mind builds, like how you interact with objects using your senses, and that the classical picture of basically whatever you're looking at sending an image to your mind, like your mind creates a little picture, like she would hate that kind of thing. It's more of like an
Wait, so she like an idealist? Like you basically the mental creates constructs of things. So your mind is creating things, or is she going to just be a normal
oh
naturalist that just says the photons are bouncing off the object and going into these sensors, these cones in your eye?
well, she thought I was too materialistic about it because she would say there are multiple realities and they come from subjectivities essentially.
So she's an idealist.
Yeah, it's I mean, I get the want to say that, but I don't know how subjectivities interacting can be coherent without an objective world.
Oh, so a lot of them are well. There's this guy called Bernardo Castro, and he's the big fan of analytical idealism, which basically says that there is a universal subjectivity, and it's basically having a dream, which is constructing the physical laws we observe and the reality we observe. And we're all part of it. We're just disassociated from it, kind of like a being with a multiple personality disorder. Separate consciousnesses can be created in your own brain.
Hmm.
And so his idea is, well, we're all just separated consciousnesses of this great thing, and evolution somehow generated that. It's a little bit wacky, but that's the view.
Interesting.
I reject it on parsimony, and it just seems like you're positing a lot of things that we don't believe exist to make this work.
Hmm. Maybe.
But I have problems with physicalism as well.
If it's anything more than Mary's room, then I know nothing about it.
Hey, Mary's room is great.
It's true.
I mean, it illustrates the broader point that we try to quantitate the qualitative, and you could do that, but there's information loss there. Now, I don't think what it illustrates is necessarily that things are not physical in nature. It's just that the quantitative description of nature is incomplete, and you need a certain qualitative description as well. So science in the sense that it's a language of numbers, is you know being a little bit overzealous when it claims that it can explain everything.
Sure.
Sometimes we need normal language to help out.
Kind of going back to the happiness thing, do you think somebody, or how likely is it that somebody would have a negative life or a negative utility or whatever and would claim to have lived a good life?
Um, well, in general,
Yeah, I guess
because it's
how
probably
would you
too
account
general
for
for me
that?
to.
Okay.
So I think it's totally possible if somebody had more concentrated, good experiences near the end of their life, just because of how memory works, they may misperceive their life to be better than it was.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's possible.
Would you say that it would have been morally better for them to not exist at all?
Well, they also have an impact on others.
Sure.
So just from that knowledge, I couldn't tell you.
Okay. But so in a vacuum, sure, but in reality, they could have had a lot of positive effects on others.
Yeah,
Okay.
precisely.
Okay.
Yeah, so I just have to look at their life.
Yeah.
Right. So if they were like chronically disabled and lived basically in a state where they could not really contribute to anybody, except maybe at an emotional level, but that's offset by the economic and emotional costs, then yeah, it'd probably be better for them not to live a life where they suffered a lot more
Yeah.
than they were happy.
How how do you compare somebody who's lived a positive life and somebody who, I guess, just I put my questions in a terrible way. How do you factor in death essentially? Like what would you say about somebody dying and they didn't know they were going to die beforehand?
I mean, under my view, this is really not going to matter nearly as much as other views, right? Because I'm saying their subjectivities are kind of always different. So the only change is now there's one less stream of subjectivities in the great river of subjectivities.
Mm-hmm.
I guess you could say there's other worse things. These are the bad things that come along with this. There's trauma to those that care about that person. But other than that,
Yeah.
I don't see any significance.
Okay. How would
As a
you
matter of fact, not knowing about that you're going to die could be argued is just preferable to knowing. In my case, I would say it would be.
um maybe if you couldn't do anything about it. I I don't know. That's the one thing is like the moment before you're gonna die, do you want to be told something bad? It's like at that point, it can't inform any decision.
Still make that last moment worse.
Yeah. I keep thinking back to like all of the warfare and poverty there is essentially, and how, if you even could, how do you compare that to all the positives we have in the West? Like, how would you go about making the calculation between like somebody's suffering because they're starving and somebody's happiness because they're playing a video game or like whatever?
So I mean, obviously, it's not going to be super easy for us to do this off the fly, but I think there is a lot of heuristics we could use. So we could say like, once people reach this certain amount of income and they meet this other characteristics, their life is net positive. And we can kind of introspect about all the features of this to see if we can confirm it with our own intuitions about our subjective experiences. But I'm not going to claim that I can just tell you right now.
Yeah, yeah. Do you make a distinction between, or do you account for suffering as well as pleasure, or how does that work?
For sure, for sure. So I mean, I think that one thing that we're probably going to agree on is I think the capacity for suffering is probably greater than the capacity for pleasure.
Yeah.
And so we can picture a numerical scale where maybe human experience can go down to negative 140 and can go up to 100. And so I do care about those.
I'm
An
curious.
alternative approach is like some people will say, well, we're going to use the same unit 1, 2, up to 100, and we're just going to be negative utilitarians or something and say that the suffering matters more. But that seems like a very weird orientation.
Yeah. Did you say at some point you were a Marxist before?
I have been a Marxist in the past, yeah.
Okay. Do you still hold the sort of ethical view that basically exploiting surplus value is bad?
Well, I'm not sure if Marxists would agree with that characterization.
You don't think so? Okay.
Yeah, so they're going to think that, but they're not going to, as a fundamental, from Marxist philosophy, that statement's going to ring really weird, because they're saying they're not making normative claims. They're
Right.
almost like they're basically like moral relativists who think that groups, act in their own self-interest, and for some reason, despite them largely not being proletarians, these Marxist thinkers themselves, they find it to be preferable to pursue the proletarian interest over others. It's a very weird view.
I feel like when I read Marx, he's doing it sure as a description because it is supposed to be an explanation, but I think it has a double meaning. Like I think it's intended to be that way. Maybe that's not how it's taken by most of them, most of the Marxists, but I feel like that's not an unreasonable take.
Well, so Marxist historians, people that study Marx, will tell you that Marx was really not obsessed with normative philosophy, and so if you were speaking to Marx, he would probably reject the idea that you're telling him, like if you tell him that you're advancing this specific normative position.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't mean that you're wrong in the sense that he clearly did have this normative position.
Yeah.
He just didn't admit it.
Do you buy into the normative position?
No, not at all.
Why not?
But first, I don't. I think the whole conception of surplus value is ill-conceived. I mean, yes, all capital was once created by labor. So what? There is compensation for risk, time preference, and organizational efficiency, and these are all value-added things. I don't see any reason why these rents are like normatively unjust. Ontological evil.
Yeah. Okay. I am going to write this down. Hold on. So if you were trying to convince me, what would be like the main things I would look into that would say somebody deserved $100 million in income? Like what value did they add where all of the workers didn't get? Well, maybe you would disagree with this framing, but I guess correct it then. It didn't get what they put in.
So, I'll say two things to that. Very interesting question. I like to say this has been a very interesting conversation so far. So, first thing I'll say is, even if they didn't deserve it, or they didn't create enough value to substantiate their compensation, I could still totally say, well, I still support the system that creates this product, even though this product is unjust. like intuitively unjust, right? Just because I care about consequences.
Yeah.
But I can also substantiate the claim that they did create enough value to garner that income. And the reason why is this is just kind of how markets operate, right? So if they did not invest that money would have not been invested. It's not going to just automatically be invested,
Mm-hmm.
which means those, the those opportunities for employment, those products, those sales would have never been generated. And so, if you have an efficiently organized market, it seems to be the case over the course of history that the capital income share is pretty stagnant over time, except in financial calamity. And it seems to approximate the value added of capital. Now, there is specific instances where that's not the case, but it seems empirically substantiated that it does track.
Okay. What what if I what if there's two worlds? One of them is the world we live in now, and the other one is where everyone starts with the equal amount of wealth. This isn't exactly possible, but like, why can't we just say the gains from using capital, I guess, should be like, at least the starting point should be equal. People who use it better should obviously get more or whatever, but it feels weird that we have a people without any wealth at all, like spawning, and then they just have to essentially be subservient to like private property.
Yeah. Well, so there's two approaches to this claim as well. So one is I definitely agree with the principle of equal opportunity, and I think we would be better for it if we had greater equality in that sense. I think we need more equality of saving because we have a lot of wealth inequality. I think we can try to ameliorate that. It would be preferable if people started with equal wealth. Although you can make an efficiency argument against this position. You can say that the average capital allocation efficiency of the rich is going to be much higher than that of the average person. And so, in so doing, even if you could make all wealth equal without some sort of crazy wealth tax, you'd actually just incur economic costs so large so as to offset the benefit. I'm not sure if I buy that argument, but that is an argument that could be made.
Mm-hmm. I think I would, yeah, that makes sense, but I think I would disagree with that empirically, I guess. Because my whole goal is to essentially eliminate, I don't know if this is an official term many economists use actually, but like economic rents, that would be, is that commonly used?
Yeah, it's used all the time.
Okay. Is there anything it refers to other than like gains from ownership, or is that essentially what it is?
Well, so economic rents are unearned. So the income you derive from an investment from delaying your consumption, which is compensation for time preference,
Yeah.
and for risk, those are considered earned income. And the rent is what we call supernormal return, unearned, which means if you got rid of it 100%, things would be the same as they are today.
Hmm.
And so it's going to also be the case for like land values, as we know very well.
Yeah.
But there's labor rents that can be extracted, where unions act like the cartel, right?
Yeah. I guess,
Uh,
aren't you saying there are no labor rents if we assume that the empirical claims about capital giving so much are true?
well, so I think there can be labor rents, and there are labor rents today in some unionized firms and in places where there's occupational licensing,
Okay.
which it's extracting rents on behalf of certain laborers to the you know to the suffering of other laborers.
Oh, sure.
Exploitation of labor on behalf of labor. Yeah, so I guess you're sympathetic to Marxism.
I I don't. It's only purely about the economics. It's not some like weird historical thing for me. Like I want this. This is going to be such a vacuous statement. I'm trying to say it in a real way. I guess I want to eliminate economic rents. I guess. So
That's not even Marxism. That's base.
yeah.
Hey, you're too correct to be a Marxist. I'm sorry. Because Marxists are just going to consider like all investment income, all delayment, all compensation for risk and delayment of consumption as a rent.
Hmm.
That doesn't even make any sense to me. Like
Yeah.
like providing money to somebody, now and deferring your consumption by 5 years and taking a lot of risk in the process. I
Right.
don't see where the exploitation is in that. There's exploitation in other places, but that itself is not a rent.
Yeah, I agree. I guess it's so weird because I talk to conservatives and they call me a communist, and then I talk to like soc dems and they call me a libertarian. So I don't know what to call myself.
Be a base liberal like me. So there's like new liberals, the Center for New Liberalism.
Vaguely.
Are you aware? Yeah, so we're cool. You can look at our website,
Hmm.
um, and you probably would agree with everything we say.
Huh. It's
Just look at the neoliberal at, and you can see the website.
okay. Is it not like anti-capitalist to want to get rid of economic rents?
No, it's not anti-capitalist at all.
Because I feel like capitalists would defend that like 90% of the time, or maybe conservatives would, I guess. But
Well, I mean, he said conservatives are right. They just defend whatever system we have,
yeah.
uh, whatever social system, whatever social relations we have in Marxist terms. The conservatives will always surely defend. But in economics, we talk about economic rents all the time, and everybody agrees, hey, those are bad. Nobody's like economic rent based.
Hmm.
Nobody says that. What you're going to see is from your actually intelligent interlocutors. They're going to say that yeah, economic rents exist. Yeah, it's not perfect, it's not great, but the government as an institution is incapable of fixing these problems without making stuff worse.
Hmm.
That is the good steelman argument against our position, and it is a serious one that we have to engage with. Have you looked into what is it called? Um, what's the word for it? Axiology? Praxeology. There it is.
Axiology. No, I haven't.
Praxeology. Oh, that's like their idea. It's like, well, actually, we don't need to make empirical claims. We're just going to introspect and derive just fundamental truths about economics. And so, even if the empirics does not align with our theory, that just means the empirics is wrong.
Oh, yeah, that sounds very Austrian to me. You just logic your way into something that's wrong.
Yeah, it's like it's all a priori. That's all of Austrianism.
Like if everybody's perfectly rational, everything will be fine.
Well, they're gonna hate you if you say that about them because that's neoclassical.
Oh
They're
yeah,
gonna be like, well, actually, there's
you're
no
right.
such thing. What is information is only held in the market. No individual has it.
Hmm. I need to
It's
read some
amazing.
Austrian. I have one on my shelf I've never read.
In other words, I need to melt my brain. I need less brain cells.
Yeah, true. Based.
I'm too smart.
Get me out of this life. Just I'll read it. Rothbard.
Oh my god. Yeah, Rothbard is just Mises but worse. Mises but less original.
I don't think Is Chicago considered like a completely separate thing from all camps?
The Chicago school is just the right wing of neoclassical.
Okay. Because I like hearing Milton Friedman talk, at least. Maybe he's just good at rhetoric, but I feel like he makes good arguments.
No, I like Milton Friedman. I think, the models are reductive sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
But that's their entire pitch of the Chicago school. They say, hey, all of these, imperfect information assumptions and monopsony assumptions, they don't really have that much effect. And they just make everything really complicated. And generally, I think they're right, except when they're really wrong, like healthcare. That's where they're really wrong.
Do you think healthcare is unfixable in the private sector?
No, I think it is. I just think that we need to be creative with how we solve it.
Hmm.
So I've written a decent amount about healthcare. If you're interested in seeing a good presentation of my views, you can find on my newsletter.
Interesting. I kind of arrived at healthcare out of a moral imperative, I guess. I don't really have an empirical cost thing necessarily, but
You cut out for a second. You said cost thing?
yeah, I guess I just don't have any attachment to either position empirically, or like this would be cheaper or whatever. It would be mostly yeah, I think it would be an ethical thing. If you want to know where I'm coming from on economics, just play the Coconut Island thing in your head, and that's that's step one.
I mean, I think all policy statements are, ethical in nature.
Yeah.
All preferences, and I think economic indicators, in effect, is certainly a relevant thing to look at to determine how bad something is. And so I'd say maybe it's not the only thing, because you just cannot encapsulate everything there is to know about human suffering, right? California.
You jumped out of the call and then back in and said California.
Oh, I said, if economic indicators could tell us everything we need to know about human suffering and happiness, then there would be no depressed people in Beverly Hills.
Mm.
But we know that's not true.
Yeah.
So clearly there's other indicators, although I think the economic is incredibly important.
Yeah. I must sound super dumb in this conversation. I'm not used to talking to somebody that knows the things that I'm talking about. That's probably the main thing.
Hey, listen, I felt this way for a really long time.
Mm-hmm.
When I first started getting into philosophy, I have a lot of friends of mine that are into philosophy. They kept using words that I did not understand.
Yep.
And I felt like the dumbest person. I just wouldn't even understand what was going on. And so they forced me to become a nerd about it, so I could finally just interpret these. They write, and all this looks like math. They use like Bertrand Russell's like analytical symbolism.
Gosh, I haven't
and
even
it's like,
tried
what
yet.
is it's like, what is going on, bro? Like, what's happening?
Yeah. I tried to read into the fine-tuning argument and just to know as much about it as I can, and it was all just like mathematical proofs and logic, like using symbols, and I'm just like, well, that's not helpful to me. Like I would have to get so deep into it to understand the different probability theories and stuff.
Yeah, it's well, suffice it to say, intelligent design is one of the best arguments for theism, and it's also terrible, which tells you, what most of what you need to know about arguments for theism.
I think when people say look at the odds at how, I mean, you know what the fine tuning and teleological argument is. I find it terrible. Like, my instant intuition is like, that is such a backwards view of how we're here because we happen to be the ones that survived to be able to fit the environment we're in. Like, you just, it's so twisted.
Do you know the puddle analogy?
I just read that recently. Yeah.
I love the puddle analogy.
It's so funny.
No, yeah, it's perfect. But there's another problem with the argument. Suppose we even accepted this whole methodology of probability.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, wow, look how unprobable it was for things to be the exact way they are. They still lose on their own view. And the reason why they lose in their own view is that God could create an infinite number of things. It's not a finite quantity. You can't even quantify it. You can't even give any probability to the current existence of things. Which means that in order for them to, try to make their view coherent, they have to stipulate another premise, which is that this God has some sort of specific motivational apparatus that makes our world necessarily more probable than, than under the naturalist position, which is going to be clearly absurd.
Sure.
They're having to change their argument they're having to change their position just to make their argument valid.
What if they would respond with like, or no, I guess that would get rid of like omnipotence. Everything I do gets rid of like their picture of God, I guess. So yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean the only escape route for theists for their view to conform and make sense of the world without having just insanely low probabilities is for them just to continue to stipulate more and more things.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to stipulate some sort of motivational apparatus for God, right? But usually they don't want to do that. So they use the cop-out answer where they say, well, his ways are higher than our ways, his thoughts are higher than our thoughts.
Yeah.
Which basically means, well, our position is necessarily incoherent. Well, so then why are you going to say it's better than ours?
True.
Excuse me. It's like, well, so you want to make an argument? No. Right?
All the time it ends up being God works in mysterious ways when you get to the foundational assumptions.
And it's like, well, whenever I don't want to defend my position, I can just suspend the necessity for it to be plausible.
Yeah. I think, at least for me, maybe there's some like counter argument I haven't heard. I think the Kalam is the most okay argument for me.
The Kalam
cosmological argument. It's like William Lane Craig version.
Oh my God. Wait. I've listened to like tons of William Lane Craig debates, but present the argument and show me how the premises fall from the conclusion falls from the premises.
Okay. Okay. Everything that had a beginning has a cause, or everything that has a beginning has a cause. The universe has a cause, therefore God exists. Or therefore the universe had a cause. I shouldn't say therefore God exists. Therefore the universe has a cause, and then he'll go on to further elaborate why it has to be a personal God or whatever with libertarian free will. Whether you agree with that final analysis is another thing. But the essential thing is the universe had to have a cause, because all things that begin to exist had a cause, and God didn't begin to exist.
This is going to run into like so many counter arguments.
Mm-hmm. The main two outs I've seen for atheists is an infinite universe, or you have to reject causation, which I actually prefer.
Well, so you can just take time as non-fundamental, which is going to make the claim incoherent. Right? So, like under one view, if you say like, okay, well, how did the universe start? Like what came before it? What came before the Big Bang?
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you think time began with all other physical laws at the Big Bang, saying what came before doesn't make sense. It's like saying what's north of the North Pole.
Right.
What? I don't know what that means.
Yeah. He'll act like you're crazy for saying it, but my response would be like, what does causation mean without time and space? I can't even comprehend what that could mean. So I
Yeah,
reject the
yeah.
causation premise.
I mean, well, my position at the current moment is I don't subscribe to the whole big bounce. Well, yeah, you just like matter exists within the concept of space time, just infinitely because infinity is not a real number. It's not. The only things that are infinite is whenever like it's something abstract. It's not describing something like real. It could be like a relational property, but it's not describing any like real quantities.
I agree.
Um, right? I was trying to avoid saying something that would piss off a mathematician, right? Because pi is infinite, but it's a relational property. It's not describing,
Yeah.
actual existing physical property. But anyway, I take it to be the case that these laws of physics exist either below or at the same level of time's existence. I think below, actually, probably. And so you can say, well, these laws of physics always existed because they exist lower than time, and time supervenes onto these laws. There is theories that say that time is not fundamental, and then you just escape this whole thing entirely because you just take it as a brute fact that these things exist. Bam. You know
Yeah.
what theists do is they take it as a brute fact that God exists, and so all we have to do to have a more plausible position is take a brute fact that something less that has less premises or less stipulations exists. That's all we have to do.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. I think William Lane Craig. He's been wrecked in so many debates. I'm surprised that he continues to go out there.
Yeah. My dad, in promotion of theism, sent me a William Lane Craig debate with Christopher Hitchens, and I'm like, bruh, I I don't know why you sent that to me as part of your argument.
Bro, any debate that involves Christopher Hitchens just has somebody getting rhetoric the fuck out
True.
by Christopher, which never prepares his questions. He doesn't have them during the question period, and half the time had gotten slammed or hammered the previous night. Obviously.
Bruh. That's my one problem with him, is that sometimes he actually doesn't answer their questions, which is a little weird, but he optically looks fine still.
I mean, he's the rhetoric god, you know?
Yeah, it's crazy.
But, I respect Christopher Hitchens a lot just because of, the impact he had on me leaving Christianity, kind of being exposed to other arguments. But I don't think he's the best illustration of, the arguments we can provide. I like Matt Dillahunty probably the most.
I'm gonna look that up. I don't know if I've heard him. Oh, I've only seen this guy in a couple conversations, not about religion, and I wasn't the biggest fan, but maybe his religious arguments are decent.
So he's the problem with Matt is sometimes he just doesn't want to take a position on things whenever he really needs to for his position. So he'll say, I don't know sometimes, which is kind of a cop out because we're comparing positions. And like some of these questions, you can't just be like, oh, I don't know how the universe started. Like, oh, I just have no position on it.
Yeah, you have to have one.
It's like, to have a worldview, you have to have one. And he does have one. He thinks there's position, right? But the best thing he does is talk about is kind of slowly walk through how evidence works with theists, because when people are trying to like prove Christianity, for some reason they think that claims are evidence, and it's just those are just two different things.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So like the Bible claims 4,000 people saw this, but we need like these people to claim they saw this for that to be evident. Because remember, the Bible in this case, we cannot take this as an empirical claim because it is the originator of all the claims that we are trying to find evidence for.
Yeah.
Right? I don't know. Who's your favorite?
Atheist?
Yeah.
Um, man. Hitchens is more entertaining for sure. I have read a couple of his books. I guess I would have to say him, but he's not the best philosopher. He's just like really funny and makes very good moral arguments.
He's he was the strongest in rhetoric for sure, and I think
Yeah.
he kind of spoke to how he my favorite thing about him is he wielded shame against the religious. And I don't think this is a good strategy for all of us. You know, my dad's a pastor,
Mm-hmm.
so I'm not going to use this. But my God, they're always, you know, raising their nose at us and saying, "Oh, for shame! Like you're responsible for the Nazis or something like that."
Yep.
It's like, no, like you motherfuckers have done so much terrible shit. Like somebody should shame y'all sometimes, you know. See how you like it,
Yeah.
and he was amazing at that.
Yep. I guess Dawkins would be next on my list, but he's kind of basic. He's like basically good. Um, I don't think I like Sam Harris when he talks about religion that much.
He just talks about radical Islam randomly.
Yeah, it's just one of the main things is like his moral system, like his meta ethics. He just thinks he's figured it out. Like, isn't his claim like if you don't think it's bad for like all beings to have like maximum suffering, then I don't know what you're talking about for ethics. Isn't that like his main thing?
Yeah, the problem is there's like hidden premises of his position, and he doesn't really respond to like the philosophical critiques of his kind of naturalism.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I don't like. I don't think that he's really that wrong. I think that, you know, the moral landscape, I read it whenever I was young. It was helpful for trying to get like a naturalist message out there on ethics, but it was not a serious philosophical work by like
Yeah.
any stretch.
So you're a moral realist?
Yeah.
I guess maybe I don't know what moral realism means, but you're you claim it can be true or false, like this is good or bad, right?
Yes, and actually, you don't even have to be a moral realist to believe that's the case.
Um,
You
I
can be a subjectivist.
yeah, yeah.
So there's true or false moral claims for a person, right? So you could say like people have goals.
I mean,
There are true or false things for getting their goals, and what is good is the things that satisfy their goals.
what's subjective about that, or what? Well, maybe it's not objective; it's subjective. But what's real about that? Just the fact that it exists?
So it's not real. It's not real. There's a fact. The objective is going to be like independent, but there's subjective facts, right?
Yeah.
So like whenever I cut my finger, I felt pain. Fact,
Mm-hmm.
right? People robbing my is not me, right? Because my goal is to be happy. Fact, right? So that's what subjectivist is going to say. And if I wasn't a realist, I would probably agree with this account. But I am a realist, and I think that there are moral facts that are independent of my stance.
You lagged out for the last second or the last sentence.
Oh, but I said, you know, I would be a subjectivist if I was not a realist, but I am a realist, and I do believe there are stance independent facts
Okay.
about morality.
Like what?
Um, so so like there's different ways you can go about this. So would you agree with me that if you have a belief that is contingent on an illusion or a cognitive bias, it is not a valid belief. It is not a justified belief.
Oh gosh. Justified or valid?
Right. So suppose that so I have a son,
Yeah.
and since he's my son, I think he's the best artist in the world. Right.
Yep.
And so I go out there and I say, listen, I'm going to enter him into like this art competition with the greats. I'm going to spend $50,000 to enter him into this competition, right? Because I genuinely believe this thing.
Yeah.
Do you think people could say, and they'd be right to say, well, this is not a justified belief. You're just being biased.
Yeah, sure.
We can explain this by your like evolution and certain things. Okay, cool. So what I would say is, I've already explained to you that we can derive it what's chiefly desirable is pleasure. I have not proven to you yet that we should pursue pleasure for all people. Right? I've just said that we should pursue the desirable thing for ourselves is pleasure. And so I think that our preference for ourselves over over others is something that we could call a bias. I think it's evolutionarily contingent. This is the argument that Peter Singer makes. We can imagine evolution producing beings that were motivated by the pleasure of others, the interest of others. And since we can imagine that, and that is a coherent idea, this is an evolutionary contingent thing, which means it's not reflective of what is true. It's a bias. Now, to kind of showcase a thing that would not change, it's not evolutionary contingent, it's the desirability of pleasure, right? There is no way evolution could go in which pleasure became something that was not desirable. It's inherent to the concept. It's kind of like inconceivable for pleasure to be impleasurable, right?
Why why is pleasure morally good? Even if it happens to be true that that's people's motive. It's because pleasure is good for me, and then you made the second step. So the only way I could disagree with this, or at least the way I should disagree with this, is whether I would claim that pleasure is good for me or not. It hinges on that.
If you accept this argument,
Yeah.
I mean, there are other arguments against my position than that, but
Yeah.
that one I don't know. I would not. I don't think I could be convinced that pleasure was not good for me, and pleasure was
Yeah.
not good for you.
Um, pleasure is good for me. I feel like we're sneaking in the word good.
I think good is just a statement of preference. So I don't
Okay.
think you could. I don't think you can ever find something that is we consider good for a specific person or group that would not be preferable for that group. I can't imagine an instance where that's not the case. I invite you to think of one.
I guess my main immediately my immediate thought is it's weird to call moral realism just the fact that people have preferences, and I'll accept like the second step where like evolution could have went a different way. Like okay, I guess I don't know what the distinction between realism and non-realism is at that point.
So, like, I'm gonna think that there are desirable things that you should pursue. Should is a weighted term, but since I'm a naturalist, I just tie it to this natural state, this physical state, which is
Right.
the thing that I think descriptively you desire, or is desirable for you if you considered it properly. Um, and so it's the distinction is, for a lot of anti-realists, like a nihilist is just going to say there's no real like valid reasons for action.
Yeah.
So there's nothing. And like a relativist or a subjectivist that rejects facts of the matter, or an emotivist, like non-cognitivists, emotivism. Are you
I
familiar?
I am familiar. I did know at some point.
Yeah. So like, I'm probably being a little bit messy with this. So like the first disagreement between like the different meta-ethical groups is about what moral language even is.
Yeah.
And so there's a couple positions. Non-cognitivists are just going to be saying that moral claims are not propositions. They're not saying if this, then that. Right? So if murder is bad, then you should not do it. They're saying that whenever we say murder is bad, we're saying murder, boo. It's not a proposition.
That
Now, this is a
sounds
very,
fair.
I think this is a very silly position because I
Really?
think these are clearly propositions. We
Okay.
say you should not murder. We're literally doing propositional statements all the time. Right? We say abortion is bad. In
Yeah.
our meaning is people should not do that. Right? For them to be correct, we need to be saying abortion is bad. I like ugh. That's it. We have no thinking about what people should and should not do.
I mean, maybe consciously you think that it's a moral statement, but maybe the underlying thing is just a thing you happen to be like disgusted by emotionally or something.
Was this a claim about how we use language?
Okay.
So you can think it's an illusion. Um, you think there are no moral facts. This is how a nihilist is going to say error theory. They think we are making propositional claims. We're just always wrong because this is not a factual matter. This is an incoherent concept.
Yeah. I'm going to make an incoherent statement is I like both of those for some reason.
And the relativists and subjectivists are going to say, well, we're making propositional statements. They're just relative to something, like
Mhm.
relative to our society or relative to our personal preference. So I think it's clearly propositional. That's why most philosophers reject
Okay.
non-cognitivism. Um, I think there are reasons for action. I think there are things that are preferable to other things. I think nihilism is a very strange view. So I think you either have to be in the subjectivism relativism camp, which is the biggest anti-realist camp, or
Mhm.
you can be in the realist camp with all the cool kids.
So what paper should I read or whatever? You said Peter Singer is somebody?
Yeah. I have a playlist on YouTube,
Oh,
under my YouTube channel of like all the best videos I find because I listen to a lot of lectures and stuff.
yeah. I will look at that.
Um, but I can tell you an argument against my position. That's
Sure.
good. This is one I've been struggling with, right? So, like I've said that mechanistically we're, motivated towards what we associate with pleasure, and so it's kind of like we're gonna move towards, you know, this pleasure no matter what. We can just be cognizant and be optimal in our pursuit or not. Um, and so, despite the fact, whenever I say that, you know,
Sorry, you just cut out?
that, oh, um, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. So whenever I say that um, our preference for ourselves over others is evolutionarily contingent, what I'm really saying is evolution produces in such a way so as to give us more pleasure from doing actions that benefit ourselves than other people, right? And so to say that this is just a bias may be a problem because this is having a real effect on the pleasure that I register. And more importantly, at the end of the day, no matter in what instance we're in, I'm motivated by pleasure associations in my physical brain. So I'm still pursuing my pleasure. It's just that my pleasure has somehow been programmed to be very altruistic. And so that's the problem with my view.
Yeah.
Now, here's the problem with that rebuttal. Okay? The
Yep.
problem with this rebuttal is if we accept self-reduction, I'm constantly a different person, which means at every moment I really can't. We can say there are technically things that are preferable for me, but I exist for such an extremely small amount of time that it's almost as if there is really nothing that would be coherently preferable for me that could
Yeah.
ever affect an action.
Yeah.
So it's like a real, it's like a subjectivist nihilism, subjectivism that almost creates a necessary nihilism.
Huh. Interesting.
And the way out of this is you can either posit that there's some sort of a joint consciousness, as some people do, like the idealists have an easy out because they're saying, well, we're all the same person.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really easy. I don't believe that. So the other way is to say, well, there stands independent reasons independent of my desires. And I haven't been convinced of that, but I hope I could be. I hope somebody can convince me. So my position actually is that I can only convince people of my position insofar they say that they want to have reasons for action. You know, they believe that certain things are preferable to other things. If you just accept that, and you accept that it might be incoherence from like an ontological point of view, then my view is the most rational, right? Because if I care about my future self, but my future self is not me, then I'm just being biased,
Yeah.
right? So if I'm going to care about my future self, I'm going to care about everybody equally. It's the only non-biased view. But I can't justify caring about my future self. You need to help me escape this.
Yeah. This is interesting. Jeez. I don't think I've ever gone this far into the weeds. Oh gosh. Bruh. Most of my conversations are just normative ethics. This is like interesting. Yeah, I'll definitely have to read more about this.
The further down you go, the harder things get. You know, so like applied ethics is easy as hell
Yeah.
because now you're just looking at empirics. Normative is, I think it's not too bad because I think
Yeah.
that deontologists are clearly just wrong, um, and the virtue ethicists are all Kant and Hegel fans. You know, that tells you all you need to know.
Bruh.
But my God, meta ethics, man, these arguments are like the worst.
Yeah.
It's so do you believe in phenomenal conservatism?
I've heard the term, but I don't know what you mean by that. I don't remember it.
So this is going to be like probably the most essential framework of being able to resolve like any moral disagreement. It's the idea that our intuitions, absent like defeaters, things that invalidate them,
Mm-hmm.
give us more evidence than not to believe in a proposition. They give us a justification. So let me give you an example. My intuition that there's an external world, so long as I don't have good reasons to doubt that intuition, gives me
Oh,
justification in believing there's an external world.
Now I remember where that came from in a
Humor.
religious context. um, yes. Um, humor. I read one of his papers before. Um, I suppose I don't immediately see why that's wrong. That sounds fine. Like you,
There's actually.
go
Go
for it.
ahead. Sorry.
I was
No,
just
no,
gonna
you.
say you. I was just gonna say like what immediately seems to be true is only what you could take as true. Like that there's a screen in front of me or whatever until further evidence can come into play to try to contradict it or change my mind or something. I mean that seems
Yeah.
fine.
I mean, yeah. The real thing is this is what like, justification is applicable. I agree with you. I think kind of almost any other view is going to be either self-refuting, like skepticism.
Sure.
Skepticism, global skepticism is just, first of all, an extremely silly view, and also it just refutes itself.
Yes.
Or like, hinge commitments. Are you familiar with that
No.
epistemology? Okay, so here's the idea. You only need to accept like fundamental axioms that are necessary for us to even engage in like the fundamental process of like determining the truth or falseness of statements in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
But this seems to be like this seems to be hiding a lot of the struggle. What are these axioms? How do we judge the difference between these axioms?
Yeah.
Right? Because under this view, like you're still having realists and anti-realists like debating all the time. It's like, well, is this really a hinge commitment worthy thing? And the way we're comparing these views is based on intuitions.
Mm-hmm.
So we're really just doing a more convoluted game of phenomenal conservatism.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. Do you believe objects are real?
Oh, that's a weird question. I've I'm gonna be so biased because I've literally been reading Schopenhauer lately, and you're gonna hate that. Um, are objects real? I don't think I would be able to justify that objects are real outside of subjects' perceptions.
So, but you do believe there's a real external world, right?
I don't know.
Oh, whoa.
It seems intuitive, so maybe I could just say that, but I don't think I would ever be very strong on the positive side.
Whoa. Okay. So whenever I say like are objects real, I mean like is a chair as a concept? Like is there such thing as a chair outside of our, idea of it?
Mhm.
And I'm just a constructivist when it comes to these things.
Right,
Like I don't think there's like chair exists outside of
right.
the minds of people. I think there's particles like quantum
Yeah.
fields,
Like you're
right?
asking me if like matter's a real thing or like whatever. Is this table
Yeah.
actually here? Or is it an illusion?
Well, yeah, like I'm going to say that there are particles that exist, but the concepts of like table, sky,
Yeah.
clouds, trees, this is clearly something that we create, we made up. We draw lines around matter
Yeah.
and we organize things based on certain properties. But ultimately, these classifications are irrelevant. That's why you cannot really objectively determine when something stops being a chair, right?
Um
Like define chair. You can't. You actually cannot do it
I
unless you have like a ludicrously long essay.
I half agree with that. That I think there's something to be said about the form of a tree, like matter taking forms that because humans happen to create chairs. That's why I feel like that's not the steel man example. Like anything that happens in nature is sort of, I don't know if I want to say it's essentially different.
Well, so you could say, okay, well, let's think about something in nature, like animals,
Yeah.
right? Our classifications of animals are obviously not are just obviously arbitrary,
I
right?
That's weird. I know what you mean, but it's not just. I don't even know how
So
to phrase this.
it's based on properties,
Yeah.
right? So that my claim is not that the properties don't exist,
Mm-hmm.
distinguishable properties, right? So clearly, what we consider the sky has different properties from what we consider the not sky,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
But that does not mean that our classification of objects is in any way objective,
It's not
right?
objective. I think I have a problem with arbitrary. Like
I
it's
think I think there's reasons, I guess you could say, that we have for doing our current animal organization. Although in some instances, it is very clearly arbitrary. Like we could very easily reorganize our classification system for
sure.
animals.
I think
We could
for
consolidate like kingdom and phylum, and the world would not end.
sure. I think for 99% of things we conceive of as being separate and distinct objects with certain qualities, it's very I don't like the word obvious. There is a meaningful distinction there that is not in any way random or arbitrary, even though you could have done it different, it would be less meaningful to us to do so.
Well, it's meaningful to us, That's why we're saying
Right.
constructive. So it's not it's arbitrary in like an epistemic sense, right? Because we care
Sure.
about certain properties more than others. There's tons of properties, and we're saying these ones matter.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that there's no reasons for us to do that.
Yeah.
Um, and so I'm the same thing about like abstract objects. Like I think like abstract objects are we construct them like math. Like I don't know if I could be convinced that like math exists out there. It's somewhere out there. You'll find it. Actually, you can't find it because by the definition of abstract is it does not interact with anything
Mm-hmm.
ever. It's like wow, that's really convenient, isn't it? But that's why I'm a naturalist because I think moral facts are literally just physical facts.
I am going to catch up on the reading to try to dispute that because I could just be completely biased, but my intuition is that's such a weird statement to make.
This is probably the most common statement in philosophy at the moment.
Really?
So,
Wow.
so
Okay.
the two um, moral realism is like 55%. Moral
Mm-hmm.
anti-realism is like 34 or something, and then everybody else is like picking their own
Right.
favorite pet idea, like quasi-realism or something. Um, and the best argument against realism is from the subjectivists. It's the one I've told you.
Yeah.
This is the most popular one these days, and it's funny because I didn't get it from reading. I just got it from like, oh yeah, this seems like it makes sense. Um, and so under any account, there's going to be moral facts. It's just whether we can say that they're going to be you should be biased towards yourself in the application of what's preferable.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can argue against that, I mean, I invite you to
Yeah.
do so. But I'm warning you, you're probably just going to be wrong. Do you know Bentham's Bulldog, like the Substack?
no, I don't.
It's like a Matthew Adelstein. I debated him a long time ago whenever I was a subjectivist, and pretty interesting. So a lot of my friends, they take a different approach to utilitarianism than I do. They're intuitionists, so they really do believe in like these abstract moral facts, and we basically peer into this abstract world of facts through our intuitions. Um, and their argument is ultimately, their substantiation for abstract facts is just as like strong as our substantiation for empirical fact. Or it's not just as, but it's close, right? So, the very idea that like empirically there's like this external world is intuition, and they're going to say, well, these abstract facts like math and morality, these are also intuitions. So,
Mhm.
gotcha, motherfucker. The only problem is not everybody shares those intuitions, right? And there's differences in plausibility between those intuitions. Like almost nobody denies there's an external world. Even the people that write books about externalist skepticism are self-refuting by writing it down and publishing it publicly.
I guess if you're trying to make a positive case for it, that's kind of silly.
It's like a solipsist conference, I'm the only real person. Me too.
I mean, hey, gotta interact with the NPCs.
It's like, man, I can't believe my imagination created such an interesting looking person.
True.
Thanks. um, yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's kind of a reason why these things linger. Um,
Mhm.
but you should look into the internalism versus externalism on reasons arguments,
Okay.
um, because that is the thing don't. I have a view, but it leads to very bad conclusions, as you know. Do you are you compatibilist or determinist?
You know, I haven't read that much into it, but compatibilism doesn't sound any different to me. I don't know the distinction.
It's almost just 100% semantic.
Bruh, that's what it seems like. It seems like they want to not seem as radical and just call themselves something else.
There is normative things though. So like compatibilists are often going to believe in desert, like ethics. So
Okay.
like we can say like giving a slice of cake to Hitler in a moral vacuum is still worse than giving a slice of cake to like, a random person that would enjoy it equally as much in a moral vacuum.
That's
And
so
like
weird.
I know, right? It's like it's kind of weird, right? Because the actions are determined, right? So like, how does this make sense, right? So I'm what you call a quasi-compatibilist, So I use language like a compatibilist because that's what the plebs need to believe, you know. I still need to use the word free will for these folks,
Yeah.
but I don't think it has any normative implications at all. And I also don't think that free will as a concept is compatible with determinism.
Hmm. I can't even coherently think of what it could mean to make decisions independently and not determined by like literally the laws of everything that's happening.
It's a completely incoherent position, in my opinion. I don't see.
It's
It's like,
incomprehensible. You're just saying words. It's like when you talk about God, you're just using language. It doesn't mean things.
yeah, it's like, somehow we have like this causality that emerges out of our choice, but it's we don't we obviously don't choose our thoughts or our desires. You know? Like I don't like if you really believe we could choose our thoughts, that means like we'd have to think about our thoughts beforehand, and we could choose our desires and experiences. Like
Hmm.
what? What's going on, bro?
This is one problem I have with connecting determinism to my ethical system is because it kind of makes no sense. but there's nothing I can do about it. Like,
He's he's seeing the truth.
like I
He's
I completely understand that they seem in conflict, but there's I feel like I could also make the point that, well, even trying to, if I become a utilitarian and try to impose like whatever, like why would it matter anyways? Like whether our system was based on pleasure or on whatever deontological principle we have, it's just like either way it's determined, I guess.
well. Wait a minute. Those are just two different. Like, this doesn't follow, right? So things are determined. I mean,
Yeah.
so what? Right? Like, that doesn't mean that certain things aren't preferable. And your view of this issue will affect what happens,
Mhm.
right? So it's just acknowledging how this operationally works. It doesn't
Right.
mean that like it actually affects what's good or bad, really.
It's maybe it is specific to my position because it feels weird to in the realm of like the real world. Oh, I don't like using these terms in in what appears to be the case in like everyday life. I feel like I really care about specifically like consent and making informed decisions and options. And then when I talk about like metaphysics and I think about how nobody actually makes any decisions technically, it's like how do I do
Based.
that?
So just be a sophisticated active utilitarian like me that uses heuristics, and you can like do all this moral grandstanding on the heuristics, but it's all instrumentalist. So you're safe.
I need to find an example that I disagree with you on that is fundamental to either position. I feel like there has to be something.
Find a position where you're just clearly wrong.
No,
Good luck.
where I'm based. Um, if I had perfect information while I was buying heroin or something, like, am I okay to do so? Like, is it moral
Um,
to buy it and use it
Whoa.
for myself?
Well, does it make you like suffer more than you would have like under other decisions?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, you're making a bad decision.
I hate that. I
It's funny because like these arguments are like if we had a crowd right now, we were on my space,
yeah,
everybody would agree with me.
I know.
Yes.
I
Yes, the
know.
person buying heroin is making a bad decision.
There's this like libertarian impulse. I just can't see that. I don't know. I know I'm willing to change my mind if there's like an argument built about something, but it's I
Okay, okay,
oh
I think I really don't understand how you square this with determinism.
my yeah.
Right? So it's like okay, suppose that there's like an alien that puts like a chip in your brain, it's controlling you, right?
Yeah.
And you know, it takes you to go pick up a knife and slit your own throat. Can we say that a bad thing just happened to you? That decision was bad.
Well, my only
Yeah.
problem is in my head I would be like I don't want this. So I wouldn't do it otherwise.
It's controlling your thoughts. It's
Or
literally
okay.
typing in the thoughts.
Um uh I that is so weird. Mm,
Okay, let's take another one. Let's take another one. Okay, you're like the freaking president.
sure.
Okay,
Sure.
so the aliens get in your brain,
Yes.
and they're like, okay, we want to just destroy the world, right?
Yeah.
So we're gonna have you go out. We're gonna have you start launching nukes, okay,
Yeah.
and then just raping people, okay, just ruin your credibility. right? And this is just you're destroying yourself in the process. At the end of the day, you swallow a grenade and your head blows up. Okay?
Okay.
Can we say that you have made bad decisions for yourself and others?
Only for others.
Oh my God.
The,
That's an insane position, dude.
I don't know. I just like he shouldn't have blown up other people, but if he killed himself, it's like, what am I supposed to say about that?
How can we say that was not bad for him, bro? He blew up his own head. He was living a perfectly happy life.
Bruh.
If he was like if he was being logical, right, and he had perfect information, he had
Yeah.
his like wherewithal centered on the well-being of himself,
Mm-hmm.
he would have not done that, right?
Mm-hmm. Okay. That was an interesting part about it is if they have perfect information, then they wouldn't do it. And
And if
I
they're
think
being
that's fine.
logical,
What
if they're being logical.
what does it mean for somebody to not be logical? Like
What?
that that's not exactly that's probably sounds retarded. So
What does it
what
mean to be rational?
well,
What?
no, it's like okay.
Are you going to say like, the instrumentalist view on rationality? Because even under that view, I'm still going to be correct.
I guess an analogy for what you're saying is if somebody's goal is to be healthy, it's actually irrational to like eat a donut or something.
Yes. And I'm
Okay.
going to say that their evolution creates us with a fundamental goal
Okay.
that we cannot escape.
Okay. I'm trying to think this through because the more perfect information there is, the more moral I would think a situation is where somebody has to make a decision.
Yeah. So there's two things going on. So one is I'm saying we're implicitly motivated by this. So,
Hmm?
you know, the reason why I say perfect rationality is necessary is first you need to realize what this thing that you chiefly desire is, right? Because people can get lost in the sauce and
Mm-hmm.
not realize this is the thing they really want.
Yeah.
They're pursuing money, but they're not happy. And then they realize, oh, wait, I just wanted to be happy.
Yeah.
Right. So that's one part. Another part is you need to be able to deal with the information rationally, right? Because you can have perfect knowledge and be
Yes.
very stupid, and then it's not very useful,
I think
right?
that's
You're
where it
not.
breaks apart for me. I don't think I care about somebody being irrational about what they want as long
Well,
as
I'm
they
not
make the
sure.
decision.
Well, it's not about wait, they. What do you mean? Make a decision. What do you mean?
Like,
You mean the particles in the brain hit each other because of
bruh.
you know freaking superposition of particles, and so this creates a decision? Yeah. What do you mean they make a decision? You're saying well, as long as the particles in their
Yeah.
brain interact in this way, it's fine. I'm just saying, well, I think it would be better for them if the particles interacted in that way.
I think I don't care which way the particles in their brain interact, and I wouldn't force them to do otherwise. Or, I mean, I'm not just talking about like actual government forcing or anything, but I don't even know if I would say it would be wrong for them to make either
What is
decision.
wrong? What is wrong? What is wrongness? Catch that up.
Well, I like to think of wrongness as when somebody's. I need to find a better word, but I guess I'll just say consent is violated. like I don't know that. At least I'll read into the arguments you brought up for sure, but at least coming in, I would say like I don't know that morality exists or is real or is some grand thing I can place on people. So I would just say everybody's a perfect like anarchist agent or whatever you want to say, and then sort of I can make economic arguments for not being an actual anarchist or whatever, but I would not
Okay.
want to violate.
But so you affirm the axiom by saying that when applied, it always leads to intuitive outcomes,
I
right? Because the intuition is the evidence, right, for the claim.
What did you mean by the outcomes part? I don't know if I care about outcomes, but maybe I
Well, so
didn't
the
understand.
only way you derive the axiom is you intuit
Oh,
it,
yeah,
and you find out which axioms are better than others, not just by looking at the axiom on paper, by looking at what it justifies
yeah.
and
So
how it interacts.
I've had so many like normative ethics conversations, and every single thing always ends up towards the agent's like consent being violated in some way, or they are somebody is coerced or whatever.
But yet, all we have to do to show you that this axiom is not necessarily perfect is to show you a case in which it leads to an unintuitive result.
Yeah, I
And so,
think if there were an
since,
obvious counterexample that I would happen to not bite the bullet on, then yeah, I'd have to give it up.
but like with sometimes you bite the bullet, but like there's been cases. Has there been nothing I've said so far where you would not register it as unintuitive? Like, say you didn't hold the axiom already, you didn't accept the axiom, you were just looking at it as you normally.
Sure.
You don't think a single one of these reductios I brought up has been unintuitive to you?
Even when I start from the case itself, my thought process is always going to end up at like, who am I to say it's wrong for them to do the thing that was worse for them? Or like, in any way, I don't think I would pass moral judgment on that.
Um,
It's there.
it doesn't you don't feel any badness. Like, do you think in a world where like people are constantly being controlled by aliens just to like, I don't know, like
Sure,
fucking mutilate themselves slowly over time
sure.
is just completely morally equivalent to a world in which everybody's just making choices to live extremely happy lives, and everyone's just prospering? You think that you're going to tell me, genuinely speaking, that intuitively there is no difference between these two worlds
Mm,
that is morally significant?
I do think there's probably a conflict between determinism and. Wait. Okay, I have a hypothetical.
Wait, you didn't answer my freaking question. That was a
Okay.
great reductio.
No. I mean, I agree there is direct conflict between determinism and my morality, right? I have to give one up, probably.
Wait, are you going to agree that the mutilation world is worth?
Well, this is. Um,
There's no
there
This is
is.
a slam dunk.
No, there.
There's a slam. This is easy, bro.
Bro. I. I don't have like immediately like crazy emotional reactions to that. I have to think about it. I don't know.
So
What is-
suppose you were watching it.
yeah.
You were you were
Yeah.
literally teleported to the ground watching these people
Yeah.
just mutilate themselves. You're telling me that like whenever you're transported to the really happy place, you're not going to say, "Huh, I think this place is better."
I completely understand where that could come from. Um,
If you say no, I just don't believe you.
I
I just don't believe.
in a world where everything is determined and people are conscious and just experiencing pain as opposed to pleasure.
Yep.
Sure, I would say the pleasure is better.
Ace. Ace. Remember. So yeah, under determinism, like literally the whole
Yeah.
action thing just doesn't have any
Okay.
significance.
I have a question for you then.
Okay,
So,
go for it.
so somebody, what do you do about the minority of people who might enjoy getting raped? Like, what is that action? Is it good?
Wait. Okay. So so give me a case.
One guy rapes one girl and she enjoys it, but he doesn't know that, just like any other situation where she wouldn't enjoy it.
Um, and like, does she like go to the police or something, or is she
No,
just like, oh, hey, by the way, like, you want to date now or something?
no, like,
Rape
is
me
the
again.
situation morally wrong? Like, they just had a rape encounter and then the guy ran away or something.
I mean, so the consequences are going to be what matters. Like, so
Okay.
whenever we look at him as an individual, we're going to say, well, this guy has proclivities that are pretty harmful,
Yeah.
right? So we still probably want to arrest this guy because most people don't enjoy being raped.
Mm-hmm.
And we want to discourage rape. But if we take it in a moral vacuum, right, where there's literally no external effects on anybody,
Yeah.
right? Then no, nothing's bad's happened. Like two people's lives just got better. I mean, that's the matter of the fact, right? The rape guy just had a great time,
That. Yeah.
and the girl just apparently had a great time.
Yeah.
So what are we to say? The world just got made worse, right? So the reason why that like reductios like this are going to be kind of struck us as unintuitive is we're suspending the rules of reality in order to make them, right? So it's kind of like, suppose it was really enjoyable to be stabbed in the face.
Mm-hmm.
Would it be good to stab people in the face? And the utilitarian's going to say, yeah, right? And everyone's going to be like, oh. It's like, wait a minute, but it's not really enjoyable to be stabbed in the face. So it's not good.
Would you say the guy should get like charged with a crime and put in prison just as a rule in general because he'll probably do it in the future to someone who doesn't like it?
I think there's three justifications for the criminal justice system. One, to remove dangerous people from society.
Yeah.
Two, to create a disincentive to do crime. And three, to rehabilitate individuals to make them better aspects of society. And so I'd say all three of those would be
Okay.
relevant.
What do you think about almost all criminals being put under house arrest only?
Anarchist, freaking tight beat. Jesus.
Bruh.
No.
Really?
Why? Why? That's very expensive.
Is it? Well, it might be presupposing my economic system. I guess I would have to add on to it that probably everyone would have a place to live and food taken care of anyways.
Because of like UBI or something?
Yeah.
They just go buy housing, except they're under house arrest.
Yeah, no,
So
like
I
it would
guess
it would essentially be like you lose access to everybody else's private like you lose access to other people's land or like the public space in general. Like you're
so. We just have to deliver food full time and like I don't know healthcare services and energy and we have to pay their rent at wherever they're living.
Maybe. I mean,
Yeah, that's a phenomenal idea. I think that's ludicrously expensive, and also
yeah.
just very difficult to make sure Ted Bundy doesn't just hop out the window and jump into his neighbor's, barbecue party to do a little rapey,
Sure, I mean
killy
there would
killy.
you'd have to have some pretty I don't know how the house arrest like anklets are now or whatever, but it might have to be some technology that would like I don't know, inject some like sleep juice into them, whatever it's called.
Yeah, I'm sure nobody will ever be able to figure out how to
Bro,
freaking get the,
I don't know. Maybe.
the ankle monitor off of.
I mean,
Come on, dude. You're too smart for these positions.
no. You can't tell me most the average or even a decent chunk of people will figure out how to break like the prison anklet system or like the wristband they have on or whatever. Like they would not like physically break, but be able to because they'd be notified if it broke. Like
You can't tell me that doubling our expenditure on prisoners to put them in a much less secure location
mm-hmm.
where some of them will literally be able to escape and some of them won't, but we're going to have a really delayed response time before we can stop them from, I don't know, murdering somebody
Mm-hmm.
is the ideal reform
Well,
to our prison system.
I think this is only a descriptive difference on some level because it has to do with what would the actual precautions be for them not leaving their land. And we would just have to go through that, I guess. Like
Well,
how costly would it be maybe?
you do recognize that when we talk about the government, we're not talking about like a theoretical government that is run by us. We're talking about a real institution
Yeah.
consisting of real individuals that will not be us.
I wouldn't do this before a UBI probably. Because it would
No,
be
remember, like this policy is going to be articulated. Okay, even with the UBI,
yeah.
it's going to be articulated by the government. It's not going to be articulated by you. We have to talk about how the government would articulate it,
Mhm.
which is like not going to be good, bro. Like obviously. Come on. Come on, man.
Bro, I feel like that works for anything though. I feel we can't just run to the government's gonna mess it up.
Of course we can. That's what I do all the time.
Hmm.
No, so UBI, if the government messes it up, right? So let's say it uses the improper delivery method.
Yeah.
Let's say it wants to make it means testing,
Mhm.
Let's say, there's going to be, I don't know, there's only so many ways you can mess it up. Let's say all that stuff happens. It still made things way better than it was before. Your policy right here, if it's not articulated perfectly, I'm not even sure if it could be,
Mhm.
but if it's not, we're gonna have fucking rapists running around killing everybody.
Well, I was determined to advocate for it. They were determined to do it once it's implemented. Get cucked, liberal. um,
So true.
I, d- I don't know. I mean, I hear what you're saying. It would have to be very. It's a really elementary thought that has not been. I have not written like a paper or a book about it or anything.
This is like the why did you let him cook meme?
I don't
Why did you
like.
let him cook?
I I do not like the state kidnapping people and putting them in cells. I don't like that.
Base. Putting
Like,
them in cells. Base.
bruh, why can't they just stay on their own land and leave everybody else alone? Like,
Their land. What do you mean their land?
I think everybody. Well, what do you mean?
Whoa.
What?
What do you mean their land? I don't know
Everybody
what that
should have
means.
their land.
Wait, what? What does that mean?
Like, you.
I'm in Georgia, bro.
Yeah. Well,
So they're gonna be on our land.
well, that's what I mean is everybody should have technically the exact equal amount of the land. But
Oh, the rental value of the land.
I mean, maybe.
And
Oh,
they're taking that so under your claim,
mhm.
um, they're not taking just their share of the land rental value.
Mhm.
They're taking way more because we're paying for 100% of whatever their current housing costs were,
Yeah.
plus all of their basic necessities at that location and security. So we're actually exploiting everyone else because they did to, like, I don't know, give them a financial reward for being bad.
Sure.
Now you don't have to pay rent anymore, bro.
So now there's a direct. This actually leads all the way back to when I joined that call before a couple days ago. Um, what? Why would it be bad to tax all of land value?
Well, I mean, I I responded to that previously. I mean, you're going to tax 100% of the value that so you're taxed on a yearly basis, right? So you can only appropriate the yearly rental value, right? This is market pricing. So even if you had taxed 100% of like land sale value,
Mm-hmm.
you're not going to get much more revenue because the land value is just going to fall in proportion, right? So imagine, I don't know how much math do you do? You're like kind of like you're like a math guy.
Uh, Maybe. I'm in Calc 1 right now. That's the level I'm at. I don't
Base,
know.
base. Okay, so you got this, guys.
Okay.
Like it's like asymptotic, you know. So it's asymptote
Yeah.
at 100% of yearly rental value, and so for each increment increase in the like tax rate, you're going to get closer and closer. But like at a certain point, past like a 20% rate,
Mm-hmm.
the gains you're getting are so small that it's like, why would you even do this politically? There's no reason to make it 100%. It doesn't do anything. You can make it 1,000%, you know, and
Mm-hmm.
you may get slightly more revenue. It's like this seems a little bit ridiculous.
I might be really stupid. I know what theoretically you mean by the lines, but why do the lines apply to this situation?
Um,
Like, why are we
so
approaching an asymptote or
okay,
whatever?
so we are the tax is based on so there's a theoretical rental value of the land, right? So the theoretical value that somebody would pay for being able to use the land for a year, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right, but like that's really impractical
Yeah.
because like people make investments, so they want stability, and there's no way to do that. So people sell land, and we approximate the sale value of land, and so we're lumping on a tax rate onto that. And so because we're lumping on a tax rate onto that, which is applied yearly, we're not going to ever get the precise amount of the yearly rental value. The market's always going to adjust. Um, and so we're never going to fully appropriate it,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because if you said it'd be fully appropriated at some point, it would be kind of a weird claim, right? So you'd say like at 50% tax rate on land, we're going to fully appropriate the land yearly rental value. So that claim is going to say if we raise the rate from 50 to 200%, there's going to be no difference in revenue. And that's going to be a pretty strange claim.
Hmm.
I'm going to say
Okay.
there's going to be an extremely minor one. I think that's much more plausible. I
Yeah.
don't see why I can arbitrarily posit at some threshold that it's going to be the revenue, the full rental value appropriating rate.
Mm-hmm. I'm trying to square what you're saying with the brute fact that it is physically possible to split all of the land on a continent and place a person on a plot. Like, could we not appropriate the value of it entirely? I might just be
No,
completely missing what.
so we're using the tax mechanism,
Mm-hmm.
right? I'm not saying that it's not literally possible.
Yeah.
Like it's like just metaphysically not possible, right? So
Yeah.
like, it is theoretically possible for us to just nationalize all land and then hold auctions for it, right? Would that ever work well? No.
No. Yeah.
That would approximate 100% of the land rental value.
Yeah. Hmm. Do you think that drugs should be entirely legal?
No. I think
Bruh.
we should decriminalize soft drugs, but I don't think we should be selling crack at CVS.
Ah, that's a lib take, isn't it? um,
Uh,
I don't.
because I care about this is why you got to get your normative ethics
I.
straight. Because once you do that, then you're going to realize that yes, yes, doing things that make everybody worse off is actually bad.
No, but I would. I guess this is like a perfect world situation. Like the FDA would heavily regulate it. You would be. Companies would be required to put so much information about how, like, what's in heroin. It maybe you could even require like some studies on like how addictive it is and how many people died per use, whatever. You could do anything you want with trying to make them have perfect information. But with perfect information, it's just so I just always find it so weird to.
So what we do you think that first of all it's never going to happen,
Yeah.
and people are not going to be rational consumers and be like, oh, let me look at all the data. Do you think that we should have hot dog stands that lace their hot dogs with cyanide, so long as they have a little sign on the place that says, by the way, we lace these hot dogs with cyanide.
It would have to be a reasonably sized sign. And the reason I say this is because
Oh my
ter-
God.
terms of service, like whatever you agree to selling your soul to Satan, those are way too long to expect the average consumer to read, to where I feel like those shouldn't be as allowed as they are.
It's not even the fact that um, it's not just the fact that people don't know the information.
Hmm?
It's even if they're exposed to the information,
Yeah.
they will not consider its implications fully. Children do this all the time. And even if they do think about its implications,
Yeah.
it's possible for them to make a bad choice.
I okay. That last part is where it's always going to break.
There's no such thing as bad choices that people make. Cringe.
If it only hurts themselves, I just can't be the moral
What do you mean
arbiter
hurts? What do you mean hurt? What do you mean hurt?
by, as in what you mean, like these pleasure or suffering.
So wait. So it's bad to cause other people suffering, but it's not bad to like suffering is bad for other people, but it's not bad for you.
Well, it's only insofar
What
as
kind
they
of
don't want suffering. You can hurt somebody if they ask for it.
so you can cause them suffering if they want you to cause suffering.
Yeah.
So you're saying goodness really just is whatever people prefer.
It is entirely preference and choices with maximum information.
That's insane. Yeah, I don't know, bro.
Bruh.
I try my best.
Bruh, I mean,
You know that view's insane.
I I really don't think so. The only problem I have with it is that my metaphysics is a little weird about it with determinism. But if we're just talking about like normative ethics and whether how crazy it is, like people
Literally
like
nobody would agree with it.
I don't know. This may not be a crowd I want to be associated with, but I feel like a lot of anarchists would sympathize.
Oh my God. Um,
Oh no.
I don't even know. I think I mean, any like maybe the really dumb fuck anarchists. I'd say that all the anarchists that I would have any respect for
Bruh.
would definitely disagree.
I, it feels so I guess intuitive evident that I just can't find myself saying something is morally wrong from somebody hurting themselves. I just
What do you mean by moral? 'Cause actually, earlier you defined morality as your axiom. So you said like morality has like an analytic
it's
relationship with consent.
well,
And I was
initially
like, that's really strange.
I have to read more into like whether I'm a moral realist or not, but my assumption is that I'm not, like walking in and with this ethical system, and I feel like that grants everybody sort of an equal non-right slash right to themselves, like or a non-right to others and a right to themselves. So like
Wait, no, why?
it's it's almost, I don't want to whip out social contract because it's not that sp- specific, but that's kind of, how would I
Well,
phrase
that's
it?
just gonna you can do the constructivist meme
Yeah.
and just be like, well, it's in the interest of society. But actually, we're talking about interests. Well, it's in alignment with my perception of the preferences of many individuals to support constructed normative systems because it benefits their preferred goals.
Mm-hmm.
Except the only problem with that argument is every single time somebody can do something that violates these rules that benefits their preferences,
Mm-hmm.
it's fine. You can't say me going and raping 4,000 people and then killing
Sure.
them all is bad
Sure.
unless it actually hurts my preferred outcomes.
Sure. So I don't, I shouldn't have said social contract because I don't think it's something like that. It's more, it's entirely armchair philosophy from me. So it's like I don't have a meta ethical position, and whenever I think about any normative ethics topic ever, I always arrive at this axiom, and I would just try to convince other people that they should too.
Well, you should reconsider the accent, bro.
Maybe.
Because your other claim, which is that it's bad to harm others or bad
Well,
to do actions against them that are in when I am defining harm as against their preferences.
yeah.
Um, that's a normative claim.
Yes.
And so my account is super easy. It's just that suffering is bad, right? So like it's gonna be bad for everybody. Super chill.
I feel
Like
like it's too
it's not
easy.
that hard. Um, well, I mean, I can't find a case where suffering is good. Um, I think like water's H2O. Suffering is bad.
I I think everything else that has been said so far is not exactly convincing, except that I need to address the determinism part because that is definitely, because I have to connect it to metaethics somehow and like metaphysics or whatever.
Well, remember, don't work backwards from your current views.
Well,
Yeah.
I don't want to just arbitrarily say I believe in free will now or anything.
Yeah. You remember this way you do meta ethics first, and then you do normative
Yeah.
ethics,
Um.
right? So like you take normative positions and you work. This is what some Christians do. They're like, well, we believe murders are bad, therefore free will must exist. And it's like, wait, that's very bad logic.
Oh man, I'm just running. I'm running myself back down the antinatalism line, thinking about how everything is determined. Oh my gosh. Um,
Are you agreeing with me more now?
no, I feel like that's just another reason why we shouldn't exist. Just
Oh
adding
my
on to it,
God.
because I because I just keep thinking about how I can't. I feel like I'm never going to be convinced that determinism isn't true. I'm open to reading any argument about it, but it just seems like one of those fundamental things. Once you know what it is, it's like it's just a truism.
Yeah, no, I agree with you.
But now that's just making everything seem even more nihilistic.
Whoa, bro, I don't see why that's the case at all.
I just care about autonomy so much, I guess, inherently. Everyone's a slave even more than they are under human systems.
I mean, I don't buy the premise that for some things to be preferable than others, humans must have some sort of internal causality. I don't like that seems like an extremely strange preference. It's extremely strange premise.
Can you repeat that? What do you mean by that?
For things to be preferable, because you said nihilism,
Sure.
right? So there's no reasons. So preferability is almost in like intrinsically about it's like a reason,
Oh,
right? It's preferable,
sure.
therefore, yeah, okay.
I mean,
So
I don't think I'm. I actually don't. I shouldn't say that. I have zero position on meta ethics right now. That's what I'll say. Um, I guess just nihilistic broadly is like,
yeah, I don't think determinism yields nihilism
I
at
mean,
all.
what's the point of anything?
I mean, I don't see how this fact changes or impacts the answer to that question.
I think I I don't know if I
All,
can
all
get
it's
this off me.
all it's doing is saying that this property that we thought existed,
Yeah,
this distinguishing property between like internal causality and external causality is fake, right?
that's huge.
There's just one thing that doesn't exist anymore.
You're putting free
Um,
will into like nerd terms. That's huge.
well, it's maybe huge with how you conceive like applied ethics, right? Or like you thought it was real, so like oh, it's a big deal to me. Like it mostly registers a lot,
It's
but I don't see the super big normative implications. The only thing it's going to affect is things that were reliant on the conception of this being a different property. But none of my positions were ever reliant on that. And I don't see
uh,
why my positions are now jeopardized.
I just
Like I presented
uh,
to you my account of preferability,
yeah.
and it's not affected by this at all.
Yeah, I understand that position, and it feels like an optimistic position. Or
I mean, you can provide an argument against it if you want.
I, it's I could easily jump to it if I felt like I agreed with it, but it's almost like it is just that intuition that I prefer. There's just you you don't see how it would be good or bad whether we had free will.
Um,
Is one preferable?
that's like oof, it's one preferable. I mean, what would it change?
I
Like you said, I don't even understand what the concept means.
I yeah.
I can't even imagine what that would be like. It doesn't make any sense.
Mhm.
Like if it means that I get to choose my experiences, like my states of my mind states
Yeah.
and my desires, then like cool. Although my choices are going to be arbitrary because they're not based on any desires.
Yeah.
So, I'm gonna choose to enjoy suffering, and then I'm gonna choose to suffer in this moment. It's gonna be like, well, I guess like, is it better? I don't know. This is really weird.
This I still agree that it's not coherent. Hmm. I guess the question doesn't even make sense because I mean, a lot of people put a lot of weight into consent. Maybe not this autistically, but decision making. It feels very intuitive, like that free will is the basis of a lot of things, even if it doesn't technically exist.
I mean, we can just go Evo debunkers on this type of stuff. You know, just be like, look at evolution, find the evolutionary explanation. Be like, okay, your intuition is invalid. Here's what I mean. I think that's the strength of my argument. It's just saying, okay, we get this empirically testable claim,
Yeah.
very much affirmed. This is literally what preference is. And so the only way you're going to be able to, like, if you accept that claim, then all this shenanigans about, oh, well, this other thing is preferable, like not instrumentally. It's just like, no, like it's just like no, doesn't matter. You can say why this intuition. It's like, well, no, it doesn't matter. Like it is literally, we've just accepted the claim that is instrumental. So I guess you want to dispute that claim, or you want to become based.
I might have to. I will. Did you read a paper or did you like listen to somebody talk about it or what's the?
Okay, you can find on my website, micahirfan.com. I'll send you a link.
Okay.
Um, uh, a paper I wrote about this a long time ago.
Okay.
This is when I was a subjectivist, so
Oh.
you're gonna see it's kind of tainted by
Oh.
subjectivism.
How dare you?
But it's a similar idea, except I probably advocate for a stronger version than I do now.
Okay.
And I'll send you the link to it.
Based. You can't catch me off guard with being unread. How dare you? Reveal my ignorance to me.
Yeah, but anyway, this is a very interesting conversation.
Yeah.
I hope my philosophical ignorance has been properly hidden.
It has.
Based.